Oxfordshire Partnership. Thank you to everyone that's online. I'm just going to begin the meeting by going through the roll call as it's set on the agenda. So if you be so kind as to let me know you're present or not, and I will mark you off. Councillor Tiago Corrales.
Yes, I'm here.
I can see you come up, but I couldn't hear you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm not getting your audio at the moment, although I can see you. I'll mark you on as present and we'll put that in a second.
Yeah, I can
apologies
hear you.
from Councillor Theodore Judd. Councillor Alex Powell.
Yes, I'm here.
Again, are you
Yes.
speaking?
Yes, I'm speaking.
Yeah. Okay, I'm not getting you for some reason, but just on my colleagues, is everyone else able to hear Councillor Powell? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, seems like everyone else can hear apart from me. Well, I'll sort that out in a second. Councillor John Broad.
Yes, I'm here, even though you might not be able to hear me.
Yep, thank you, John. Councillor Barry Wood.
Yeah, present and correct.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. Councillor Besmira Basha. I don't see Besmira yet. Councillor Bob Johnston.
Present and correct.
Hello, hi, good to see you and welcome. I can see you and I can take it other people can hear you as well. Councillor Charlie Hicks. I don't think I've seen Councillor Hicks yet. Although he has said he's coming. Councillor Lee Rawlings.
Present.
Hello, Lee. Thank you very much.
Hi.
Councillor David Turner, I'm sure he'll join us shortly. Councillor James Barlow, he has given his apologies, and we should have Councillor Ali Gordon Creed on the call. I did see Councillor Creed.
Present and correct. I'm here.
Hi, good to see you. Councillor Andy Cook.
Present. Not sure about correct.
Councillor Emily Smith. Councillor Emily Smith, I saw Emily.
Sorry, yep, I'm here.
Yes, I see you now. Thank you. Councillor Debbie Hallett. Debbie just now. She was on the call. Looks like, yes, she is. Yeah, we've got her on the call. Councillor Sandra Simpson. Expecting Sandra as well. Okay. Councillor Carl Rylett.
Yep, I'm here.
Yep, thank you, Carl. And Councillor Michael Brooker, who's given tentative apologies, but maybe here. Okay. Thank you. So we have got at least one person here from each council, so we are quite. Chair, can I just turn over to you whilst I sort my volume out? It's just a problem at my end, I believe, if you could take over from this point.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm going to take it that we've just done apologies for absence and substitutes on the grounds that we more or less have. Are there any declarations of interest, please? I realise it's unlikely, but no, I see no indicators of that. In terms of announcements from me, the only announcement I have to make is that in respect of the future Oxfordshire Partnership Reset that I'm anticipating Councillor Leffman to come as as it were, guest speaker who will introduce that item for us when we get to it, I suppose. So I'm going to keep going, Kevin, until someone tells me to stop. Item number 2 is minutes of our previous meeting. Are members content that when I get the opportunity, I assign the record of those minutes, that they are an accurate representation of what took place? Thank you. And item number 3, public participation. I think there aren't any this time, Kevin.
Chair, I think Kevin may still be unable to hear, but that's correct. There's no public participation logged.
Yeah. And I think, Andrew, we're going to move to the future Oxfordshire Partnership Reset item. That's the idea, isn't it? Going to deal with that one first.
Yep.
And we're anticipating that Councillor Leffman might be able to join us for that.
I'm here, Barry.
Excellente. Hi. Hello. Good to see you. I wonder, Liz, if you'd like to introduce this item for us and put a bit of context to it for us.
Yes, sure. Very happy to do that. I'm very happy, obviously, to take any questions that the panel might have. Well, just to give you a bit of background history to this, as I'm sure all of you know, the growth deal was really the foundation, if you like, for what is currently the future Oxfordshire Partnership, which was known as the Growth Board prior to, well, I think when Emily actually was chair, we changed the name to the Future Oxfordshire Partnership to reflect what it was that we wanted to achieve. That growth deal, which was negotiated in 2018, is going to come to an end in March of next year. So essentially, the job of the FOP as it currently stands has been done. So the question has arisen over the last few months, what do we want the FOP to do in the future? And I think it's fair to say that we have worked very well collaboratively over the last few years. I think those of you who've been involved with the FOP will recognise that there are a number of things that need to be done on a county-wide basis. Now, I know that there are some aspects of the FOP's work that haven't been so successful, and we have now abandoned the idea of a 2050 plan, and the local authorities, the districts and the city are now putting together their own local plans, and they're all at various stages. But the fact is that there's a great deal that we need to do together. And some of those things include the Oxys and infrastructure and how we develop infrastructure across the county, what infrastructure is needed and where it's needed. Some of the things we need to discuss are around things like doctors' surgeries and where they need to be located. All of those things are still very much a county-wide issue. And therefore, having a partnership between the leaders, we believe, is really important. But rather than having the Future Oxfordshire Partnership as it currently stands, where we've got members from the LEP, and I'll come back to that in a minute because, of course, that's changed too, where we've got people from our health partners, where we've got people from the universities, where we've got people sitting on there from all sorts of places, actually, including the LEP members from various parts of the county. Rather than having that very wide group of people getting together on a regular basis, the leaders want to turn this back into what it was originally, which was a joint committee. And the idea being that we can then take decisions as political leaders on the things that matter to our constituents, to our residents, to our county's residents. And we can bring into the discussion some of those other organisations when it's necessary to do so. It doesn't mean that we're going to sever completely the relationship with the universities or sever completely the relationship with our health partners. But we would like to have a joint committee which makes decisions for the county and for the district and city councils, and have those partners who we believe are going to support some of the things that we consider most important available to us to help us to shape the future of the county. So I'll say a few words first of all about the LEP. The LEP has now been absorbed into the County Council, and in fact at Cabinet today, this afternoon, we agreed how that's going to look. That is now going forward. We're setting it up as a separate TECL company. It will be controlled by by a group of shareholders, which will be the Cabinet, and it will be also bringing in an advisory group, which will help to shape the strategic economic plan for the county, and also help to shape the business plan for the LEP. So that's one of the aspects of life in the county that's changed. The other thing that's going to come about, we think, is devolution. And that's something where I think collectively, as leaders, we need to have a view about where we want to go, how we want to shape our future in terms of either a combined authority or indeed, for that matter, within the county itself, how we want to shape things. Because I'm hearing rumours to the effect that we're not just talking about devolution, but possibly things like local government reorganisation. But it's really important that as political leaders, we have a say in how that's going to work. So that is another aspect of the work that the FOP will be undertaking. But I have to say that this is very much a work in progress. It's important to recognise that although we may establish a formal joint committee, we still have to talk about what it is that we actually want to achieve. We need to agree a strategy. We need to agree a way of working. And therefore, we also need to agree whether or not we need any subcommittees, what those subcommittees might look like, how we want to relate to those subcommittees, and what their remit will be in relation to the FOP. So those subcommittees would include organisations like ZCOP, which is now becoming a county-wide organisation. It would include the Local Nature Recovery Partnership, for example, and we would through them we would look at ways in which we can collectively approach the things that are really important to all of us, I think, including sustainability, biodiversity, nature recovery, net zero transition, climate adaptation, all of those things that really we need to do together. And when it comes to things like infrastructure, looking at place shaping, and looking at how we can collaborate at a strategic level to bring forward the things we know we need to do, such as, for example, managing things like renewable energy, managing issues around water, which we know are problems for all of us, and also looking at ways in which we can jointly get together to deliver things like affordable and social housing as part of a sustainable mix for the whole of the county. So that is where we are going with this. This, as you know, is going to be coming to the FOP meeting in a week or 26, so it's a week or so's time. No, where are we now? 2 weeks. Next Tuesday is coming to the FOP. So any questions that you've got or any comments that you've got on this, I'd really like to hear, because it is very important to hear from everybody about, whether you think we're moving in the right direction. And I can see several hands have shot up. So, Chair, I'll hand back to you to take questions and comments.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm going to deal with the calling members in the order that I see them pop up. So if I get it the order wrong, you'll have to say, "Oi, you've missed me out." So first one I got is Charlie Hicks.
Thank you, Chair, and hi, Liz. Thanks for joining us this evening. You may or may not know, so I sit on the Place Scrutiny Committee in Oxfordshire County Council, and I also sit here, and I've previously voiced my misgivings about the governance arrangements that exist on this at the FOP. Namely, my concerns have been in that the de jure, i.e. the legal powers, have sat with the FOP. Sorry, the legal powers have sat with the county council, right? But the de facto, i.e. in reality, who makes the decisions, has sat with the FOP, which is fine. But then the scrutiny that sits around it has been, we've not been able to properly scrutinize the FOP where the de facto decisions are made, because we've not been set up in a way that has scrutiny, sort of the legislative scrutiny powers, i.e. we've not been able to set our own agenda. So that's meant that there has been a gap, to my mind, in the way that the governance arrangements has been set up. So you've basically been able to make decisions without proper scrutiny, in my view, at FOB as de facto. Then it's gone to the county council for rubber stamping, which is the de jure, either legal sign off. But by that point, the decision's already been effectively made. So given that I still have those concerns, and I raised those with Anita and I've raised them with Andrew, and I don't believe they were properly addressed, I would like to see them be properly addressed as you move forward. So with regards to the paper that's put to us today, paragraph 24, on the proposed joint committee powers, what de jure powers would this have, right? So de facto powers, yes, you can make decisions and talk about it amongst leaders, but presumably then the de jure, i.e. the legal powers, has to be signed off by yourself, Liz, and your cabinet members in the county council. But so where in that process is proper scrutiny going to take place? In particular, I'm interested in the agreement of strategic infrastructure strategy, because that policy area, I believe, hasn't been properly understood or looked at, despite the fact that PASCO has highlighted it as the #1 reason why we have high transport emissions, which is our #1 sector for decarbonisation. So if we want to get decarbonisation done properly in the county as a whole, we need to make sure that the strategic infrastructure strategy is done aligned to our transport policies. But my concern is there's no way for me to sit either in scrutiny in place or in scrutiny in FOB to look at this. So do you see my concern, and how is that going to be addressed moving forward, please?
Do you want me to answer the questions as they come up, Barry?
Well, I think if they're complicated like that, yes. Otherwise,
well, I will
might
address
not
that.
Remember them.
Because actually there are no decisions taken by FOB. FOB doesn't take decisions as such, and there's no intention to change that. The decisions are taken by the individual councils, and everything has to go through those councils. So decisions, for example, and to go back to the growth deal, although the growth deal was negotiated on a county-wide basis, the accountable body now is the county council. So the county council actually has the say as to how that money is used and how that money has been allocated. So, for example, when we've had to make changes to the allocation of that funding, that has actually been made by the county council. So you are in place committee, you can ask for that to come to the place committee, and there's nothing to stop you from doing that. This is why actually this is called a scrutiny panel and not a scrutiny committee, precisely because actually those powers don't fall to the FOB, they fall to the individual councils. But it is really important, I think, that we have those conversations as leaders, because it would be easy for us to say as a county council, oh, we're just going to go ahead and do a transport policy and then everybody else is going to have to agree with us. But actually, there are lots and lots of things that we need to have to do collectively. And one of the things, for example, is when we're thinking about housing and bringing forward things like sustainable housing, affordable housing, social housing, it's really important that we have a county-wide view on this, I think. It would be easy for us to lose sight of the fact that we need to join these things up. That's what the FOB is for, but it's not a decision-making body in the way that the county council and the district and city councils are.
Okay, well, in that case, can you remove any reference to decision-making from this paper? Because there are lots of references to decision-making, and so that's totally at odds with what you've just said.
Okay, well, I'll have to go through that and just find where that comes in.
For example, on paragraph 24, it says, in order to promote delivery in key areas and build confidence in joint decision-making approaches and structured, a limited but strategic list of powers should be considered at the outset for the revised joint committee, right? So what you're saying is at odds with what we're reading in front of us.
See the terms of reference.
It's asking you're asking us that this should have powers, but there is no legal basis on which this thing should have powers. Ergo, we're at a problem in terms of...
it's a similar thing actually to a combined authority, isn't it? That's what we're talking about. It's effectively a miniature combined authority.
But it's not,
but
because
at the end of the day,
combined authorities are given powers from government, whereas this is not. So it's absolutely not legally the same thing.
No, it's not the same thing. You're absolutely right. But it's a joint committee. That's what it is. That's what it's defined as. It's a joint committee, and that's a perfectly reasonable structure to have in place.
Can I just before we go mad on this one subject, Andrew, can I just ask for you to perhaps set members' minds at rest, because I've always understood that the whatever you call it, growth board, FOP, SPIP, doesn't really, whatever it what is or was, there is no power in inverted commas in it, because the constitutional councils, the individual authorities, have to sanction everything themselves individually anyway. Is that too simplistic?
It's a complex area, and I guess we probably shouldn't get too bogged down in the history. But the FOP at present is constituted as a joint committee. It is possible to delegate powers to a joint committee if the constituent authorities choose to do so, but they haven't formally done that, and that's why this is not a scrutiny committee, exactly as we said a minute ago. Specifically for the housing and growth deal, a requirement of that was that decision making should be done jointly, and for that purpose a memorandum of understanding was written that created a framework for that to happen. Now, we're not here to consider that, so I don't really want to get bogged down in it, but that was the way that the monitoring officers at the time chose to work around this conundrum. The proposal in front of you here that will be going to FOP next week, this paper, it's got my name on it because I drafted it. What I was trying to do was reflect back the discussions that have been held amongst the leaders and others over the last few weeks. The proposal is that the joint committee could have some joint powers. That will only happen if terms of reference are drafted and then approved by each of the constituent authorities. We don't yet know whether that decision will be taken. If that does happen, my understanding, subject to MO confirmation, is that a joint committee would then require some formal scrutiny function, as opposed to a panel like this. And I'm very keen that should happen, because, Councillor Hicks, I recognise the points you've made in the past. I think we've all felt that in some respects this has been an unsatisfactory experience. So I don't want to preempt the decision making at FOP, but the reason the paragraph there talks about decision-making powers is because that's what we have been asked to put in. Whether it's what the FOP members choose to do next week is another matter.
But I would add to that this has to go back to individual councils.
Yes.
It can't be decided by FOP on its own. If we are going to allocate any kind of powers to FOP, that has to be the decision of individual councils.
Understood. Okay. I'm going to keep going on the list that I've got in front of me, hoping that it's the right order. So Andy Cook.
Yep, thanks. I'm afraid I'm probably going to come across rather negatively. This has felt very much with the reason for FOP has expired. It feels like FOP is an answer in search of a question now. It shouldn't be what do we want the FOP to do now the reason for it has expired, but what do we need? Do we need a FOP at all? A joint committee sounds good, but why a regular joint committee? Why not ad hoc meetings as and when required? And the things like water, you've mentioned, we have ad hoc water boards and forums as required. There are at least 2 district councils that really do not want a shadow unitary or shadow combined authority to grow up. And you've called it a miniature combined authority. And it says in here, as Charlie's pointed out, a limited but strategic list of powers should be considered at the outset. I question whether there is any role for an organised regular FOP in the first place, rather than ad hoc meetings as and when required. In the second place, devolving powers to it is very dangerous in as much as it will start looking like a shadow combined authority and begging the question to government as to what devolution should be set up when we actually don't want those. And thirdly, if we do devolve powers to it and you do dissolve all scrutiny, power without scrutiny is anathema. A fourth one that I just noticed as well, development of local planning policy. That's very dangerous territory,
Outrageous.
as it can mess up local plans. We've had to be very careful in FOP in the past, and a joint committee, regular joint committee acquiring powers to form a sort of shadow authority that's pulling in planning policy as well. That's walking on very thin ice in my understanding. So apologies for being very negative, but I'm feeling very negative about it. I'm very worried that we are jumping the gun, creating an answer to a question that we haven't yet been asked, and an answer that many of us don't actually want to see, as well as power without scrutiny. Rant over.
No, it's okay, and I think to some extent, I think what Councillor Leffman and officers have tried to suggest or say clearly for us is words to the effect, well, this is a proposal for a statutory joint committee to do the things on this list appended at the back. You, the constituent authorities, get to sanctify or nobble this as you see fit. And so, in a way, the speech you just gave probably will need to be restated at Vale of Whitehorse, because you
my nobbling boots will be on, certainly.
Yeah.
Yes.
yes. Okay.
We move on.
Emily.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Liz, for coming to introduce it. I had some similar queries that have already been picked up around scrutiny, because scrutiny is missing from this paper, yet it's talking about powers, and the issue that Charlie raised is the confusion has been, where's the decision made? Because that's where the scrutiny needs to happen, and things are getting missed. So at the moment, it's a big mess, so it needs to be looked at. But at the moment, as written, decision-making and scrutiny need to go together, and at the moment, it doesn't. I had a couple of questions. One was around the costs. So when we've talked about the reset of FOP in these meetings and other meetings, one of the things that keeps coming up is reducing costs, reducing the bureaucracy. So in the paper, it talks about the costs and the new way, and it talks about how it should be able to be delivered within the cost envelope, but that might need reviewing. So what we're saying is we're not reducing the costs, we're going to keep the costs the same, and they might go up a bit. Also in that cost, which I've asked many times for, is what is it? This isn't the true cost. So the costs that are in the paper are the yearly contribution from each council into the running of the FOP to pay for the shared offices and everything. But the paper doesn't say anything about the costs for each council in terms of officer time and the additional meetings that have to take place at each of those councils. So I think before any decision can be made, we need to have the actual costs in front of us before we can make an informed choice. In terms of devolution, I suppose my question on devolution is, do we really know what's happening? Because we've been here so many times. Over the decade, we have spent so much money and time in meetings, writing papers and consultants' bills, designing what we would like devolution to look like in Oxfordshire. And every time it hasn't happened. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing or a good thing. It's just the fact that it hasn't happened. I worry that we're doing that again, basically, because we don't actually know what is on the table from government. We don't know yet, unless, I suppose my question is, do you know something that we don't know?
Well, what I do know is a white paper's coming out on the 28th of November. At least that's what we've been told. It may be delayed because there's some discussion going on in government around things like local government reorganisation. But we do know that a paper will be published. So we're not just talking about devolution in the abstract.
Okay.
We're certainly not designing some kind of evolution plan that isn't never going to happen. We are going to be pushed down that route for sure, and we have to have an idea of what it is that we want to do about it. Okay. So I think that there has to be a forum for leaders to get together and reflect the views of their councils as to what that devolution deal is going to look like. But we will undoubtedly be pushed down that route, in my opinion, from what I'm being told.
Okay. But that paper's coming out after the FOP meeting, so the decision on it will be made before the white paper's published.
Yes, but I mean, I don't think we should assume that this is going to have any bearing on the FOP in the sense that, well, it might do in the sense that we might have to come up with some kind of another plan that fits with whatever we're being asked to do in terms of devolution. But I think that we need a forum where we can discuss that, because, you know, otherwise it's not going to happen, is it? We're just going to get railroaded into doing something we don't want. So I think we do need to have some kind of, I think that is one of the roles of the Joint Committee, actually, where we can have that discussion.
Yeah, and I agree that there is a need for a forum to have that discussion. I suppose the devil would be in the detail if this moved forward in terms of the terms of reference. For example, would each council have a veto on all of the decisions or not, or would it be a majority vote like on the LEP? So it's kind of, in the past, that's how the LEP was set up. So how would that work? That would be quite crucial to know before supporting or opposing a proposal, I think, as well. Anyway, I've got more, but I'll be quiet now.
Very, very, very shrewd point, Emily. Yes. Can't have no majority votes. Tut tut. Whatever next to democracy. I couldn't stand that. I think that the point about where is the scrutiny if there is a new Quango? Where is the scrutiny? And I think Andrew has tried to explain the answer to that, but I think it's a point that we can make to the FOP meeting. You just be sure that you're sure on how the scrutiny function is going to be handled. If I can keep going and see how we go. Now my little list of names keeps dodging about, but Lee, you've been on the screen for a long time, so I'm going to you next on the ground. You're looking impatient, mate.
I am, yes. I do have some sympathy with scope for some strictly cross-boundary issues. I do not want one Oxfordshire rearing its head again, and I don't want this Frankenstein of the growth board as it was to clamber up again. I'm very concerned about the demand for more formal powers. I'm very concerned by the suggestion of moving away from a coalition of the willing. I would want the terms of reference changed so that decision making is strictly on a consensus basis and not the qualified majority that's written in there now. So if 3 councils go one way and 3 councils go the other way, presently the chair makes the casting vote, and that's the decision. That's not acceptable. I'm really unhappy to see efforts in the paper to try and get hegemony, whatever you want to call it, power over housing again, and start to intrude on the role of the districts. I think that's wrong. I don't mind a bit of community first Oxfordshire and helping people with some local CLTs and all that stuff, but I don't want to see that stuff in there, and I think it needs to be explicitly ruled out. If a site crosses a boundary, well then let those 2 councils sort it out bilaterally. There's no need for this great bureaucracy to cut in. I'm really upset by page 7, paragraph 7, bullet point 3, which says the aim of this edifice is to maximize investment and therefore jobs and therefore population and therefore housing and concreting. All of that's going back to where it began. And that's the horror story that we don't want. We fought very hard against that. And I think the residents of Oxfordshire have made their view on that very, very clear. The OGD is done and gone, and frankly, from my point of view, gave very little by way of infrastructure funding for the chaos and for the land gains that were made on the back of it. I'm a supporter of industrial strategy. I'm okay with some advisory economics, focusing on growth to be GVA per capita and not gross GVA without regard. It's the per capita that's about making people's lives better. And I don't want it to be the gross growth and the levelling down agenda that we want, that used to be there. Of course, we need an overview of utility and necessary transport infrastructure. I do mention the word necessary transport infrastructure because I'm not looking for a new expressway or any of that stuff. I don't want to see the main body called a leaders board, which implies, again, a decision-making body. I would prefer to see it called a forum. By all means, let's have a discussion space. By all means, let's have consensus where we can. And I'm okay with local energy plans and nature recovery and net zero cooperation and all that good stuff. But let's remember that devolution is about moving power down. We seem to have these combined authorities being discussed with a commissar to run them, which we're going to try and anglicize by calling it a mayor. But it's really an extension of government's arm. It's not some wonderful free liberty. Devolution is about moving powers to a more local level, down from government and down, frankly, from county as well. And we could look very well towards the Berkshire model and the small unitaries that we do see there.
Okay,
we've had a letter. I'm not quite getting quite close now. We've had this expression of interest letter, but that seems to me it's a bit of a dead letter because the response from MHCLG wasn't very supportive of the fundamental things that we suggested we didn't want to be in it. I don't want to see any intervention on the district's sovereign plan making and planning policy. I'm very keen on, as I say, consensus, a coalition of the willing. I think we should probably look at halving the annual costs. We need to look at a menu with prices here so that we can look at each thing and have a proper discussion about, does it add value? Is it duplicating? And go from there. I'm worried by some other developments like the LEP setting up a super cluster corporation, which sounds like the old words all over again. That seems to me to be a worry. So we need to add real value and not duplicate the existing operations of the districts. That would be my view.
Okay, well, thanks, Lee. To be fair, Lee, I think what you've said has always been your view. I don't think it's a new view.
I haven't seen. As I say, I've been supportive of some of those things that are cross-border.
Yeah.
But yes, some of those things which are levelling down, I absolutely don't want to see.
No, the only observations I would make, my opinion is no more valid than yours. The only observations I would make is small unitaries as per Berkshire is they're going west, financially unstable for a whole load of reasons. Little unitaries can't cope. Same in other parts of the country, not just Berkshire. You need to have a look in Bedfordshire as well. But anyway,
we may have to right scale, but the point is that they've actually done pretty well in other ways.
I think as Liz indicated in her comment at the beginning, there's a lot of rumour control about what the government will or won't say about so-called devolution and local government reorganisation, and we don't know until we know.
Yeah, I just hope they leave the local bit in local government. That's all.
Well, I understand. As a man and boy district guy, I'm of the same ilk. But sometimes I get power mad.
Can I just respond quickly to that, to what Lee was saying, though? I think the point about this is actually in paragraph 9, where it talks about the areas that we can focus on where we can add value by collaboration. That's the whole point of this. It's about adding value. It's not about, taking over powers from other authorities. It really is about adding value where we can.
Sure, collaboratively. As long as the economics is per capita and we strike out the bits about housing, I don't have a big problem with para 9.
You've got okay, good. We've cleared up para 9. Thanks, Liz. I appreciate that. I've got to keep going with my little list of yellow hands, or we'll be here all bloody night. So,
sorry.
Next one I've got is John Broad.
Thank you, Chair. To me, it struck me as being three levels in a sense. We've got the government who are about to do something which is really worrying or potentially worrying as to which way they're going to jump and which way they actually want to look at the way the country is run. And if that happens, then the other end of the issue, as has already been mentioned, is a definite worry, which is where and this is where people have made comments to me about these sort of subjects, is where do the people end up being able to have any input into this? And so you could say, well, the middle bit of the three I was mentioning is the districts. But then, as was also already mentioned, if we had a leaders group or a leaders board, as it was called, then you could end up with this situation where a local plan is being very close to being complete with the consultation from the residents of that district, and other areas have got their own local plans. You go to this board and they disagree with the way the plan is going, and so they want you to start again. I mean, that just wouldn't work. It's madness. Now, going above that, if you had the board to try and determine, rather like we were talking about the 2040 or 2050 plan as it used to be, strategically planning things like roads, rail, maybe water, electricity supply, that kind of thing, then it wouldn't be too bad. But once you start venturing into the field where the residents should be involved and start making decisions at too high a level, where the residents' decisions or residents' consultation work is just being ignored, I think you're in real trouble. Now, could that board also be something that comes from the government? Why are they not sorting out the water problem, the electricity problem, the grid, the road system? I mean, after all, it's Highways England. You know, those are already kind of working on. So if it was a board, then it should be feeding up to the government to tell them this is how we're going to do the local plans. And the duty of to cooperate, of course, means all the districts do have to cooperate anyway in a certain extent. So we can feed upwards rather than them feeding downwards. As was already mentioned, we've got to be very careful we don't end up with a kind of dictatorial state. I'll stop there. Thank you.
I think you're absolutely right. If I can just say, John, I think the whole point about this is that collectively we can make a case to the water companies, we can make a case to the energy suppliers in ways that we can't individually. And in any case, what's the point of everybody separately having a conversation with the water companies when we're all part of the same water company? So I think there is merit in that. And thank you very much for making that point.
Okay, next one then is Alex Powell, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sort of going to continue on the same sort of vein as many people have already expressed. I think, firstly, thank you for bringing the report, but I have some concerns about the way in which it's currently drafted. I think the first of these is in effect that, as has already been pointed out, we have provision in there for proposed joint committee powers, but the only reference to scrutiny then comes as a legal implication, effectively saying we will do this because we are required to. It's therefore not really setting up scrutiny as a central element of any devolution, and I would not be comfortable, therefore, with the report as written for that reason. I think it needs to be effectively looked at again with a focus on scrutiny, given equal importance to any talk about powers, if there's going to be talk about powers. I also think that in that sense, there's a sort of it's getting caught in the sense of trying to do sort of two things, because I completely agree with what's sort of listed at paragraph 9, this sense of areas where we can sensibly work together, where it adds value. But then when you have the paragraph on powers at paragraph 24, you're sort of talking there about two entirely different bodies, and they're wedged together in the same report. And that gives me a sense that maybe, well, and completely forgivable because we're in a moving situation with government and sort of national context, but it seems like there's not yet here a clarity about what is being asked to be approved. And I think this causes a major issue because we're sort of being asked to approve something that isn't yet complete. And therefore, my sense is, actually what needs to happen is a bit more thought needs to go into what the proposal is before we sort of get to this point where we're talking about it. And I think a lot of the issues we're having are reflective of a report that has two quite divergent things in it that haven't quite been ironed out at this stage.
Just to say, we're not asking for your approval of this.
No.
We're asking for your input because we haven't yet had the discussion as FOP around this paper. It's coming to the FOP for the first time next week, and there will undoubtedly be discussion around whether or not this is the right way forward. This isn't set in tablets of stone. I just want to make that point. And we haven't bottomed out, what the purpose of the board is. It's simply that we believe as leaders that there is a need for us to communicate on a regular basis. Going back to the point that was made, why can't we have ad hoc meetings? Well, actually, that never works because you've got to get it into people's diaries. So I think having something that is called a board where we can get together and thrash out some of these issues is the right way forward. But I wouldn't see this as, this isn't the final version.
No, and I think, Liz, it would be fair to say, wouldn't it, that we're all of us living in a moving feast, and to some extent you've got to move with it, because otherwise you'll never be ready if it moves quick. That's a mixed up metaphors, but I think folk know what I mean. Charlie, I'm going to come to you for a double take in a minute.
Thank you, Barry. Just going back right to my earlier question, and I'm glad that Liz and Andrew had a go at it, because what I heard, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but was slightly different. So I heard from Liz that it's more of the plan is for it to be more of a convening place to get all on the same page, but the formal decision-making powers, the legal powers, remain with the local authorities. From Andrew, it was in fact, no, we will get some devolved powers from central government from this because of the provisions already allowed in legislation through the Joint Committee. Whatever the case is, it's not great that there's a difference between the person leading the FOP and the leader of and the chair of the FOP. You guys need to be on the same page and have a really clear understanding, because I think there is a lack of clarity, or at least there's a miscommunication. But either way.
Well, I think I might have miscommunicated to you in that case, Charlie, because I don't think we're saying anything different. We're saying that there might be a need for powers at some point, but not right now. And what we see this as is a way of convening leaders together and looking at what we need to do in order to achieve the things that we want together. I think I'm right, Andrew, in saying that we're not suggesting here that we are going to have powers. We're saying that there could be the mechanism for that if that was needed in the future.
Yes, I'd agree with that. Thank you. And I think the comment I made was that if powers are devolved, and repeat that would be by agreement of each of the constituent partners, so it's not something that FOP can take to itself. If powers are devolved, then I believe it will need a formal scrutiny function, and I would want that designed in. But we're not at that stage yet, because there needs to be a discussion at the FOP meeting next week, which will, I'm sure, shape the task for officers to go away and work up more detail.
Okay, can I just come back on that point, which is to say, because looking at the recommendation at the very top of the paper, which says that the future Oxfordshire Partnership endorses the proposed powers, purposes and priorities and steps set out in this report. So it's not clear in terms of what you're asking yourselves to make a decision on. That to me is not clear from what Councillor Leffman just said, that it's primarily in the first instance a convening group that then may in the future, it looks like you're making the in the future decision now about saying, yes, we'll adopt these powers. So whatever the case might be, there needs to be clarity on that point, and that also needs to be reflected in this report that we're being asked to scrutinise here. If I may, onto the point of devolution, to earlier points about we don't know what government said, we do know what government said. They're very clear they want to decentralise power. We're very, to my mind, from what they've said that I've just posted in the chat, they want to simplify structures, which I think reads as they want unitaries, and they very clearly want mayoral combined authorities from letters that have come out from the Deputy Prime Minister. So I'm very much in favour of going with the grain and shaping it as we want it to, rather than trying to inhibit it, stop it, because I don't think we'll have much effect that way. I do have another question around governance here, Liz, which is around, my understanding is that government is mostly communicating with Tier 1 local authorities. Is that right? And Tier 1 local authorities are taking a lead in terms of their approach. Is that correct?
Yes, all the communication to date has been with the Tier 1 authorities.
Excellent, thank you. And am I also correct? This will require a full council vote on whatever the tier 1 local authorities get back to central government on.
I honestly don't know anything. I really don't know at this stage, Charlie, what we're being asked to do. I honestly don't know. I mean, clearly it will have to come to council at some point.
Okay, so because that in that instance, the governance again is really important to be precise on this point, because if it does require a full council vote in Oxfordshire County Council, then there's a question mark around, does the executive, i.e. the cabinet, with a minority administration, is that an appropriate body with which to be leading these discussions? Do you see what I mean? Because if it requires 30.
Well, I think we're getting rather off topic here, if I may say so.
I don't think we are, because if you're talking about
council and the minority administration.
Hang on, if you're talking about,
if I may interrupt you, Charlie, I think we are off topic, and this is something you can take up offline with.
I don't think it is, because respectfully,
I'm telling you that it is. I know. I'm telling you, it's off subject. Thank you very much.
We're talking about devolution.
No, it's off subject about.
The paper has devolution in.
No, I'm just saying, no, we don't want to talk about this anymore now. All right. I go to Debbie then, please.
The topic has devolution. You don't want us to talk about devolution. That's bizarre. We need a scrutiny function to scrutinise the devolution discussions. That's my point, and I'm not sure the current governance arrangements are appropriate for that either. Now, Barry, I'm the vice chair. You're the chair, but that's odd for me. The devolution word comes up 12 times in this report. So the fact that you're stopping me talking about devolution feels like
no. I'm concerned about the governance at County Hall and about whether or not it's an matter for the executive or the whole council. That's what I meant.
So in that case, then, because this is a leaders, that's my point. This is how it relates to this forum here. If therefore, in this proposed group, the Oxfordshire County Council's voice on devolution can be represented by the leader of a minority, but the decision actually holds with full council, is that the appropriate constituents to represent the county council's voice? That's, I feel, a legitimate governance question with relation to the paper.
Yes, I guess it is, but it's a question that you need to take up with the monitoring officer at County Hall. Because the rest of us don't know.
For any district council, any council that's minority led, is it appropriate that
yes,
the minority leader represents?
I belong to a minority led district and have led a minority administration in the past, and the bottom line is that in most local authorities these days, power rests with the executive or cabinet.
And I would also remind you, Charlie, that the leader of the city is also leading a minority administration right now too. So I'm afraid there are quite a lot of us in that.
Absolutely. So my point is then, okay, if that's a less politically difficult point to make, then that is, from a governance perspective, my point is to say, can the leader of a minority council be representative of the whole council on this joint committee? But it's particularly important for the tier 1 local authority, because the tier 1 local authority is leading discussions with regards to devolution.
Yeah, and I think the answer to your question is yes, but you need to double check with a monitoring officer rather than a layman like me. Let's go to Debbie, please.
We can't hear you, Councillor Howard.
No, can't hear Debbie. You might have to go out and come back in. Meanwhile, I'll go to Bob.
Yes, I'll be very brief. I think we're in danger of making ourselves completely peripheral. We know what the government thinks. We know that they want to simplify government. To me, that means unitaries. And we really ought to be trying to get our act together collectively, the six councils in the county, as how we can best respond with one voice to that. Otherwise, we're going to get utterly trampled on. To me, listening to the discussion tonight reminds me of the peoples on the the servicemen on the American base in Hawaii. Pearl Harbor's about to happen. I'll leave it at that.
I think you got a point. Yeah, we don't know exactly what's going to be in the much vaunted white paper, but I'm with you, Bob. I think that it could be a full-scale reorganisation, as Liz has also hinted, but a really brave government would need to say, we are going to introduce reorganisation. Here you are, here's your part in it. Not, would you like to volunteer for a reorganisation, please? Let us know in 6 months what you think. Because in my experience, no turkeys vote for Christmas. Not one with a head office in Banbury doesn't, anyway. If I can go to, let me just check that out. Carl, you haven't had a tilt yet.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Liz.
Can you hear me? If you can hear me,
I'll come to you in a minute, Debbie. We can hear you now. Yeah, I'll come back to you in a minute. Go ahead, Carl.
Okay, okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll be brief because we've talked about this already for a while now. I think most of these recommendations are sensible. Growth deals coming to an end. We need to streamline what we do accordingly. Think about what opportunities there are for cross-cutting, rather than have a bureaucracy which serves no purpose, isn't adding value. So definitely, I think it's very good to be looking at this. So I think really that's I think the main concern is about scrutiny. And so exactly what form is that going to take? If there's no panel or committee, whatever you call it, then is there going to be some kind of clear mechanism for reporting to the city district councils, and then for giving the responses back again to the partnership? I think that's very important. That's what I have to say.
Yeah, thank you. Understood. So I think there's some second biters now. Start with Lee.
I think you want to go. Do you want to go to Debbie next?
Oh yes,
Barry?
I beg your pardon, Debbie.
Thank you.
Go you ahead now.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No, it's all right.
Yeah, I know, Barry, I think you and I are the ones here that have been involved in this since the very beginning. And your role has changed, but mine has gone away and come back, because I've always been keen on the scrutiny of what the Growth Board did. I sent around my thoughts earlier today, because I can collect them better on paper than I can speaking on a microphone that doesn't work. But I agree with much of what's been said, and I have two additional points that I haven't heard anyone mention, so if I may. This will be some interesting feedback for the FOP members next week, I think. So there's been talk of the need to have cooperative conversations amongst the councils for issues and deliverables and projects that span that cross the boundaries and span the entire county. I'm concerned that we have shown a poor track record in learning from our failures from the Oxfordshire, the Growth Board, and the Future Oxfordshire Partnership. I was on the committee that worked on the JSSP, and that collapsed due to poor communication. We weren't able to resolve our differences. And indeed, the FOP itself, on feedback from that advisory committee, the FOP itself was not able to resolve the differences constructively. So a really, really important piece of work had to be abandoned. Now, I've seen nothing to say that we've done anything to learn from that. I have seen no forthright, frank discussions of what happened and how we can change the way we operate to work better. Correct me if that's gone wrong. I mean, if I'm wrong, but I haven't seen us make any effort to learn from what went wrong to change our ways in the future to do it better. So I'm worried that to rely on this body to facilitate collaborative conversations and cooperation on projects is just doomed. Yeah, doomed. So the other thing is that Liz, I heard you say that the important thing was that FOP be adding value to projects, especially, as I've already said, projects that cross the boundaries of the districts and that are countywide, and you've listed some of them, and they're in the report. My question has to do with other county authorities or other broad authorities who deliver stuff like this cooperatively all the time, and they do it without such a body. So how do you see that FOP is necessary to continue to deliver cooperative projects when others do it all the time without anything like FOP? I just don't see the necessity of it. I think we got comfortable, or the leaders got comfortable with a structure that was helping deliver the growth deal, and it did do that. And in a concern for the future of Oxfordshire district's cooperation, it looks like it may be a handy solution to something that we don't even know what the question is yet, as has been expressed. We don't know what government's going to require of us. I don't think cooperative delivery of infrastructure projects has had a glowing record lately. Look at what's happened at the Oxford Station and Botley Road. Now, what could FOP have done to make that better for the residents of the western part of Oxfordshire? So all of the words that are in the report about the aspirations and the goals for the usefulness, the utility of a FOP type structure, a leaders board, if you will, I don't see that any evidence that we've been successful at doing this in the past. I do see evidence around the country that other people can do it a different way and be successful at it. I'm very worried about the lack of data and details on costings, as Emily has brought up. And I think that we need to look at the actual cost of this to the authorities in the county before making any decision. So I'm kind of questioning the assumptions, basically. But as I said when I started, this will be interesting feedback to the members of FOP, because so far no one here tonight has seemed to be in favor of what's being proposed. And you're right, Liz, we don't get a vote on it. You get to vote on it.
Can I just make an important distinction between strategy and delivery? We need a strategy for the county, which everybody agrees with, on the things that are stated in this paper. But it is not up to the FOP to deliver these things. It will be up to the individual councils to deliver on things like housing. So if we agree that actually we have a county-wide issue to do with affordable housing, can there be a way in which we can work together to try and solve that problem? And can we find a strategy for doing that? For example, I mean, I know that, for instance, the city, you know, they've got their own housing delivery function. They've got their own company. Why does that have to be something that's done in the city? Could that be something that we could do jointly together? Could we learn from each other on how we actually deliver on some of these things? And yes, we can all work in our little pockets, and the county council can just say, we're going to deliver this infrastructure here, regardless of what you think, districts. But actually, isn't it better that we get together and talk about these things? And by the way, there are other counties that do this. I know in Hertfordshire, for example, they do. I don't know off the top of my head about other counties that have joint committees like this, but they do exist. And they are actually important, in my opinion, because it would be very easy for us to go off and work in our little silos and not have these conversations. And actually, if we are going to be told by government that we have to become a unitary authority, then we're going to have these conversations. So my advice would be that we start now, rather than saying, why are we bothering to do this? And I do agree about costs. I think we need to look at those costs. We need to be clear what we're actually spending the money on. But I don't think the fact that we haven't got clear about that or scrutiny is a reason for saying that we shouldn't be doing anything together, because I actually think there's a really strong argument for saying that we should work collaboratively with one another.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. And of course, Northants and Beds work together in their own growth board as well. And I think growth board's actually more commonplace than people think. Okay, so I'm going around some houses again now. So short contributions, please. Lee?
There we go. Yeah, it was just literally to press on this point about decision making. Liz is saying we don't make decisions. Andrew's paper says we do. the terms of reference, in my understanding, says that there is qualified majority voting with the chair's casting vote. I believe I'm correct on that. I'm sure Andrew knows the facts on it. If we're going to abolish scrutiny, no problem. But if we're going to if we're going to change the basis to consensus, the need for scrutiny is much less, isn't it? Because everybody's agreeing, and it's reasonable then perhaps to do the scrutiny within the individual authorities. But if in fact we've got this majority voting approach making decisions, imposing it on the unwilling, then surely it's wrong not to have scrutiny. So sorry, that's enough.
No, it's a good point, but I think in practice.
Well, let them answer, Barry.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I just think in practice, it won't come to the horror show you think it will, or could. But anyway,
keep everyone honest and write the right things in the terms of reference and the.
Well, fair enough. I think that we'll be able to make that point next week. Emily.
Yeah, I'm glad we've moved on to talking about devolution because there's loads in this paper that's got nothing to do with devolution. So I wanted to talk about the other kind of themes that we're sort of working on. So and I want to go back to the sort of costs and the value for money. So as councils, we have to make decisions based on what is good value for money, what is going to benefit our residents, and is not going to cost the taxpayer a ridiculous amount of money. We all have to do that as part of what we do as councillors. So I'm looking at it from that lens. So that's why I'm really keen to have proper costings in here, because this is just a fraction of the costing that's reflected in this paper as it is, but also the duplication. So going back to Debbie's question about if this is having to have a FOP or FOP Mark 2 or 3, is there another way? So for example, we've got the local nature partnership, which is working really well. So why do we need this as well? You know, is it duplicating? We can do the work on I'm trying to think of an example now. Yeah, the affordable housing ones is an interesting one, Liz, because that you mentioned, because obviously Oxford City does have their own housing stock and other councils are now buying the housing stock, and we're learning from each other. So we already do that. Our offices already work with each other and learn from each other and collaborate where it's appropriate. So I was just really struggling to see the value for money argument for keeping another layer on top when we're already doing some really good stuff that doesn't need this.
Yeah, and I quite understand, Emily. Two observations from me. Perhaps I should stop making my own opinion so much. But the first one is accountancy when I started training for accountancy, I was told that it's as much an art as it is a science, which I thought was a bit bizarre. But anyway, I've learned since that it's true. And when you allocate overheads, costs to projects or functionalities, you don't change the cost of the overhead. I make it up. If you've got 6 planning officers at your council and you pay their wages, you've got them.
But if all our officers are in other meetings, Barry, to do with the FOP, they're not doing their other stuff.
Where you allocate their costs doesn't change the total cost. It just puts it in parcels. You still got the cost when you finished.
It's a question of what the time
you move
priority
their
is.
resource on.
Barry, just to come back on that, what I was saying, just to clarify what I meant, I wasn't talking necessarily about, well, I was partly talking about that, but also it's that value for money for residents. So when councils individually are deciding on our budgets and how much resource we put to do different tasks and do different pieces of work, if there's an additional piece of work that needs to be taken into account, we need to make a judgment, don't we, on whether that's a good use of resource, not necessarily bottom line numbers, but a good use of resource on behalf of the taxpayer.
Yes, of course you do. But you get to reallocate it to another project, is what I'm saying, rather than sack somebody, probably.
Yes. Projects that might be needed.
But then the other services aren't getting delivered. So it's like you've really got a finite amount of resource, haven't you? So it's how you use it to get the best service for your residents.
Yes, it's my fault, Emily. I should have remembered. Don't argue with Emily Smith, you'll lose. Okay, Alex.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll try and be brief, but I was actually to ask about a couple of things we might recommend to the FOP. I firstly think it would be really good if we could recommend that when the FOP is endorsing this and requesting the work from officers, they make a specific request for scrutiny in the event of powers to be central to the way things are developed. I think everyone in various ways has expressed a concern about the scrutiny element, so it would be really important that that's there.
Yeah.
I also know there's been the discussion about devolution. I appreciate it's been, is it in, is it out? I think it would be really good for the issue of scrutiny around questions of devolution to also be recommended as something the FOP needs to look at. And I would also agree with what Emily said about costings. Again, it would be really good if we could recommend that some more costings are put into things. Hopefully that's helpful just to try and boil down what many people have been saying, because I think those are three really important things.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Actually, if I can try and Lee, is that an old hand or is that a new?
That's a new hand when we're coming to talk about resolutions and recommendations.
Yes. So what we're talking about now is what to say, whatever day it is next week on this agenda item, and what's been suggested is, and strikes me as being sensible, is that we comment on that when there is whatever you end up with as a new Quango, and it's a joint statutory committee, then you, as it says in your report, you are going to need joint statutory scrutiny as well, and we look to be, affirm that will be the way of the world, and that there should be the FOP should be asked to comment on whether there will be a facility to, at some point, should it ever happen, will there be an opportunity to scrutinise devolution as a reorganisation, what the hell ever it is, combined authority, new Valhalla. Will there be an opportunity to scrutinise that other than at the individual councils? It's worth asking the question, even if the answer's no, there won't. And the third element was, excuse me, we really need to be really clear about what the costs are of the current operation, including us here, the scrutiny panel and supporting it, and the new arrangements as set out in this in the report that's going to the FOP, just so that they, the FOP, and anyone else who's watching or listening knows, in round rough terms, what the cost of operating a Quango is. Why not? I guess it's a reasonable question the public would have. Is there any? To me, while we have enjoyed ourselves immensely, mostly me, I have to say, is there anything else that I've missed out there? Lee?
Yeah, I would go back to saying recommend to change the board word to forum, go for consensus decisions, or at least bring out the issue of what the majority basis on which decisions are made, because they're written into the terms of reference presently. I would say, based on what I've heard, exclude housing, local plan and planning policy. I don't see those as being, generally speaking, things that decisions should be made on. There might be a bit of cooperative discussion, as there often is. If somebody's got a good policy wording, well, why not share it? But I don't see this as making those decisions. Strict cross control, and I really want to see that maximisation of para 7 bullet 3 taken out, because I think it completely takes us into a different place, which actually conflicts with the Oxfordshire vision. And I don't think that's the right. I think that's old wording, and I don't think that's right. Yes, we want some investment, of course we do, but we don't want massive investment, jobs, and population growth. That's not.
Can I just clarify something here before you say you want to take that out? We are very short of funding for projects like rail, and that's the sort of thing that we need to be thinking about. And I don't think I would want to see that taken out, if I'm honest, because we have to do that collectively, I think. I mean, the county council can do it, but it's better if we're all together on this. So I think there are some projects. It's not about building lots and lots of roads or houses. It really is genuinely about the things that we all collectively want, which is, you know, more rail connectivity, more active travel, etc. But you know, I take your point. We don't want to.
I completely support that, Liz. It's just the way it's worded. It's all investment, bar none. It is how it's written now, and that's a hark back. And I think we need to qualify that to see where we want to go, and it could again link back to the strategic vision that we have that to keep other people.
Lee, will it be easier for me to say? To ask the FOP to double check the wording on their document to make sure it doesn't cross over the strategic plan.
I think we could add words like, you know, that support our strategic vision into that.
Yes.
Actually, that would be fine. Yeah,
much better on the rails.
I'm very happy for you to suggest that. That would be fine.
Okay, good. I'll do that. I'll do that then. Okay.
So consensus decisions?
Say again?
Consensus decisions?
That's what this is all about.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, let's make that change then.
I'll ask for clarity on that, Lee. It's not in the end analysis. The leaders will decide what they decide. But it's clarity on what it is that they're deciding won't do any harm. So I'll ask for it. Andy, anything from you?
Yeah, I think that the one thing that we are all agreed on is that the devolution element, which I'm not going to discuss in detail, is the crucial bit that we all see as the top priority for any meeting body of the leaders to discuss and try to get some kind of consensus position on. I fully agree with Lee's thing about consensus being crucial for that. I would suggest that we pare everything down and go with a single mission, which is a forum for devolution proposal discussions between the leaders. And we have it meeting as and when required, because everything else that takes them off that mission is a diversion. It's something that we'll all argue about whether or not it's needed there or not. For example, we already have structures for things like the Oxfordshire Underwater Flood Roundtable, which we have on an ad hoc basis to get things together. We can do that on other things, but for this, I would suggest we strip everything down to a forum for the leaders to meet to discuss devolution proposals, because everyone's absolutely correct. It's coming at us like a train. We have to try and work out what it is. All the other elements in there are all nice to haves. They're all very worthwhile, very worthy. We can discuss who needs to do what at which level. But the one thing that we're all agreed on is we have to face up to the devolution proposals. So I would recommend that we strip it all out. Devolution proposals leaders board to meet on an ad hoc basis. If we decide to aggregate more powers to that after that's been made, so all well and good. But start with a minimum viable product. Start with something that is focused on target, on mission, on a mission that we all agree on.
Okay. The difficulty is that what I'm seeking to do here is to what scrutiny panel recommendations do we want to make on the paper that the FOP is going to consider?
I'd recommend we strip everything out apart from the devolution bit and make it ad hoc.
Don't have the paper and replace it with one sentence.
Pretty much, yeah, because otherwise we are just looking for a question to which this board is the answer. But we know what key questions are coming up, and that is devolution, and that is the only one we're all agreed on.
Yeah, I'm happy to test that because I think we've had a diversity of views this evening, Andy, many of which said it's nearly right, but you got this bit wrong, or there's some benefit in this, but what about that, or how much does it cost, or what do you mean decision making, or all sorts of stuff. But no one has said ditch it and replace it for a now and again discussion on devolution. I think you might have said it at the beginning, to be fair.
I think
So
I might agree with that too, though, because what I've been saying is that we haven't explored adequately, or they haven't explored adequately, why they want to continue with FOP. If the purpose is just a preparedness for government devolution, then what Andy says makes a lot of sense to me.
Well, you can support his view then, but I think what I want to do is to test the consensus in this panel before I go into bat on your behalf. I need to know how many people think the way Andy and Debbie do. Do you see what I guess what I'm saying is I need to have a vote on whether to say that.
I think Bob's looking to come in, Barry.
It's entirely different to what we've been saying. It's entirely different to a lot of the stuff we've been saying. Kevin, how do you count things like that? How do you count votes here?
Well, probably we'll have to do a named go through the roll call and ask for thumbs up or thumbs down. There might be a way to do it in Zoom, but it's probably better to keep it simple.
Yes, so go with the roll call for and against thing then, please.
I think Bob is trying to speak, Barry.
Say again, Lee?
Bob had his hand up to speak. Oh, but he's taking it down.
Oh, so taking it down now. I think he was probably saying, "Get on with it, have a vote, you fool." Okay.
I didn't use the word fool.
Emily, do you want to speak before we?
Can I just clarify what the proposal is? So is basically the proposal on paragraph 9, we remove the second, third and fourth bullet points and assess whether those are being addressed in other forums?
No, the proposal is, as I understand what Andy says, is what you got to do. What you got to do is have a forum that gets ready and discusses devolution. That's all. Thank you very much. Good night. Okay.
In effect, to strip out the second, third, and fourth points from 9, and the rest pretty much. That's the key thing, because that 9 is what's saying what it's for. It's for devolution.
Yeah, but okay. So Emily, you are right then. That's what he's saying, yes. Just to be clear, but it ends up with what I was saying, doesn't it, Andy?
Well, yeah, we can take away the other bits, which are all very important, but the key thing for us to be working together on is.
And you're saying because it's key, it should be the only thing for now.
Yeah, and then if that works, we can then add things to it. And
yeah,
I would recommend, rather than getting tied to a schedule, we can't meet again for another 3 months. We've got to come up with this. They should be able to respond.
Oh, it's okay.
Instantly.
It's okay. Yeah, we got it. I just wanted to. Otherwise, we'll spend all night discussing what the vote is before we have a vote. Kevin, we're clear now.
I need to clarify something.
You want to clarify something?
Well, I'm just trying to clarify. Are you saying, Andy, that we should not proceed with the local area energy partnership, nature recovery, net zero work, and so forth? I guess you're not saying that, but I'm not quite clear what it is that you're suggesting.
That.
I doubt it, but I don't know. Let's hear from Andy.
Do these things need this forum?
That
Can we have specific forums for net zero energy? We have a climate emergency board in Vale, so why not have a net zero energy board as we need it?
But that, yeah, okay. But the technical answer to Lee's question is, we want your view of
not that we don't go forward with those, but this particular board, this particular forum goes forward with this specific mission.
So we have multiple forums.
We can have any forums we like for specific items that we need as and when we need them.
Okay.
Each of them focused on target. I
think I'm more and more clear. Go you ahead with a roll call, please, Kevin, for Andy's proposal.
So just to be clear, it's a yes is a yes. I agree with Andy. With those proposals, so just to make sure everyone's as clear as we can be about what they're voting for. So I can and ask my colleagues if they could help me with this as well. So Tiago, if you're double checking your Councillor Carlos, you're still on the call.
Yes, I still. Yes, I still.
And are you able to give a yes or no, or I guess an abstention?
Yes.
So you're a yes in support of the proposal. Okay. We don't have Theodore. Councillor Alex Powell.
No.
Okay. Okay. Councillor John Broad.
No.
Councillor Berry Wood.
No.
Basha, just double checking she's not joined whilst I've been tapping away. No. Councillor Bob Johnson.
No.
Okay. Councillor Charlie Phillips. Is Charlie still on the call? Just checking. Charlie, just Councillor Hicks, please let me know if you're on the call. I do see him as being on the call, but I can't just Charlie Hicks, Councillor Hicks. Okay, I will move on. We don't have Councillor Felix Bloomfield. Councillor Lee Rawlins.
On balance, no. I think that might be a bit too far.
Councillor David Turner.
Did you say David Turner?
Yes, I did. Councillor Turner.
Yeah, no.
Councillor Gordon Creed.
I say yes as the first step.
Councillor Andy Cook.
That'll be a yes.
Making sure. Councillor Emily Smith.
Rereading all the wording again, and I'm going to vote yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Debbie Hallett.
I think it's a good idea. I vote yes.
Councillor Sandra Simpson. Councillor Simpson still on the call. Don't see Councillor. Oh, she is on the call. So Councillor Simpson, if you're there, are you able to hear us? Councillor Carl Riley.
I say no.
And just double checking, I don't believe he's on the call, but Councillor Michael Brooker. See Councillor Brooker. So just sorry, Chair. Maths is not my strong point, so just bear with me a second.
I was keeping count as well. I think that was a 5-7 loss.
Yes, I agree with that, Chair.
Okay, good. Thanks for that. First time we've had to have a vote on it, Kevin. That was a bit of history made, my friend. Very interesting. Okay, anything else on this agenda item? I'm conscious we've got a whole load of other stuff to go on with.
Chair, is there any alternative? Are you in the absence of success of that proposal? And are you happy to go with the 3 areas that you identified?
Yes.
Feedback?
Yes.
Just want for people to be clear about that.
Yes.
Okay, yes, I'm happy from my perspective too.
Thank you, Chair. If you're happy for me to leave, I will leave now. And thank you all very much for your comments and for such a lively discussion.
No, we're very grateful for your time, Liz. Very grateful.
Thanks, Liz.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Excuse me, Chair. Was this being recorded? This meeting?
Mm-hmm.
It is.
It is. Is it in the public domain?
It is. Yes.
Could we recommend that FOP watch it so they can hear the discussion?
So we can give that as part of the feedback. Yeah, in advance.
I think that would be valuable. That was a
You're
very
right.
close.
I think it'd be very valuable.
Right there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good idea, Debbie. So next one then is item number 5, the housing and growth deal update at the end of Q2.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. I'm here on behalf of Oxfordshire County Council. I'll provide an update mainly on the scheme delivery, as I haven't got my finance partners, but colleagues here. But I can, in Annex 1, you can see sort of our allocations to each of our various schemes. Again, we're still slightly over-profiled by £500,000, which we're still managing through the same contingencies we have done throughout our delivery process. We currently have got about 10 projects that we've delivered. I'm happy to kind of provide a quick slideshow if that's of interest, but I can also just give the verbal update if that's preferred. We've concluded about 10 projects in total at the moment, alongside various development projects. We have got Banbury Road Roundabout still in construction. It will complete in February 25, still on track to do so. Benson Relief Road, we are now completing that scheme as well. I think the final accounts will be drawn up in the next month. Woodstock Road Corridor is also still ongoing and anticipated to complete in the spring of next year. And Padbury Roundabout also still on site, and that will be completed in February of 25. Kidlington Roundabout and Wantage Eastern Link Road are the significant ones that we recently completed. And I think Wantage Eastern Link Road, we've got an opening ceremony in about 2 weeks coming up for that. We've entered in construction contracts for Abingdon, Lodge Hill, and Steventon Lights, and work will start on site imminently. And access to Whitney also still programmed to commence soon. That's pretty much my update.
Okay, that's great. So my understanding is that you can tell me I'm wrong. I often am. The housing and growth deal is supposed to finish by end of next March. It's a financial year chop off.
Yes.
And so, are you, in essence, are you confident that you don't probably have to exactly finish? You probably have to just lay the first brick or something. Do you know what I mean? Don't you? You can. There are wheezes you can get round to commit the money rather than actually spend it. So you're confident that you're not going to be left with any money in the kitty. Is that fair?
We are confident. We're confident that we'll have the money spent, and we're confident that nothing will be returned to Homes England or MHCLG. We are using it up as and where we can.
Yeah, that is the most important criteria.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. The other question is, and you may not know, it doesn't matter if you don't know the answer to this, you can let Kevin know, when you do know the answer. And that is, as I recall, way back when it was first signed, the housing growth deal, there was an arrangement inside it whereby you could use housing and growth deal money to forward fund something that was needed, bit of road or whatever it was. You forward funded it with the housing and growth deal money so that the houses could be built behind the road. I'm simplifying and making this up. It was a housing.
That would have been good.
Growth deal. But the idea was rather than grants, some of it was loaned, and when the houses were built, you gathered it back in. Do you see what I mean? It sort of went, and the idea was it was circled. It went round again and built another bit of road.
You're talking about recovering the funds?
Yes.
Through our developers?
Yes.
I haven't got a firm answer on that, Councillor.
No, that's okay. I didn't think you would, but it's just, it would be as well if we could know what happened next, or is there any, because if it's got to recycle, I'm getting to my point finally, you'll be pleased to hear, that if there is recycling, then there has to be a continuing sponsorship, scrutinization, blah, blah, blah. There has to be bureaucracy behind it. And so it's just as well to know what the plans are for that. That's all really.
Okay,
Emma.
I'll make sure that we include that in our Q3 report, if that would be helpful.
That'll be very helpful. Thank you. Thanks very much. Emily.
Thank you, Chair. I was in your report, and actually in what you just said there, Valerie, you mentioned that the Lodge Hill project and the Steventon Lights are to commence imminently. And I just wondered whether, well, first of all, what does imminently mean? If you're able to give any more detail on that. And the second one was just to confirm that both those schemes are on track and fully funded, and there's no risk to them at the moment.
They are on track, they're fully funded. Imminently means that some of the early works will get started. I think on Lodge Hill, that's the lay-by works. I think we had hoped to get started in November on that, but that may be pushed to February or January, February. But yes, still on track, and the same for Steventon Light. I think we will do site compound and set up this side of Christmas, but then with the actual works starting in earnest really in January.
Thank you. That's a really useful update.
Lee.
I see that the Watlington Relief Road is not on the list, and so I understand this is slightly beyond, but I'm just asking if there's any update on that. I realise it's not going to come within the growth deal monies now.
Yes, that was the project where we were at risk of not spending the money all within the period. So we've taken away a portion of that money and reallocated it elsewhere within the program. We've had to resubmit Rec 25. That's gone in at the end of October. I believe the advert is out on Thursday of this week, starting another 30-day period within planning. We've also put forward a capital proposal for the funding and to come forward from our various other funding sources, let's say, but it's a pity Councillor Leffman has just left, but yeah, OCC is very well committed to finding the funding and proceed with the project. So we're still hoping we are aiming for planning committee in January. Once that's come forward, planning conditions discharging, we should be able to start in the spring, granted funding is available.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yes.
Bob,
I just wanted to reassure people, because I'm the county councillor where Lodge Hill is actually happening, though the media and a lot of other people seem to forget that. But I have been kept fully up to speed, and I can reassure everybody that things are happening. For example, the archaeologist happens, all the conditions have been discharged, like drainage, biodiversity, you name it, the list as long as your arm. Mitigation is happening and happened. In Kennington, we've had all the new yellow lines, the resurfacing of roads has happened, and the crossings about to go in, etc. It's on track, and I can reassure you that as of certainly this morning, all the funding's in place. Shovels are about to go in the ground, so just let them get on with it.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson.
That's very reassuring, Bob. Thank you, David.
Yes, good evening. Sorry I joined late. It took me over half an hour to get onto the system. This evening I had to go to my home computer. It's just about the clarity in the public's mind about some of these schemes. I talk perhaps about the Watlington Edge Road, the Benson one. There is complete confusion amongst the public as to whether that's going to happen or not. And I'm just wondering how we can publicly bring a bit more clarity to the people. It's very difficult as local councillors as well, because at times I'm not sure.
If you are referring to Benson Relief Road, that's nearly completed. Watlington Relief Road, however, I can't say more than to say that planning has been submitted again. We are waiting on that consultation period to conclude at the end of that will be end of December. Planning committee 20th of January of next year. Discharging planning conditions, and February is when the capital proposals are taken through our cabinet. And we should have an answer then on the funding.
Could we record that in the minutes and then I can actually quote it to local people?
Good idea. Yes. Well, it's nice to see you again, David.
Yes,
I hope you're keeping well. I hope you're keeping well.
Thank you.
John.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick couple of points. The obvious ones, of course, we got to the end now, and the House Lane realigned road is not there, even though the tunnels are ready for the road to go through. And I know there was some problem with COVID, which has affected the timing as to why that couldn't happen, but it does leave the problem now. You might know that the road goes through the eco town, which was meant to have 5,000 houses. The review made it 6,500 houses, and the new review is now 7,500 houses. So that road, rather ironically, seeing as paragraph 3.1.1 on page 26 says the grant funding supported the housing from infrastructure programme on the basis it would accelerate the provision of at least 6,500 houses, which might not otherwise have come forward at this pace. If you built that road, you would have had 7,500 houses. I just find it ironic that, you've put that in there, and it just annoys me that we haven't got the road that we planned that would release that much housing and is still there waiting now to be built. So I hope you've got some scheme up your sleeve to find some money for it, because it is desperately needed. And by the way, you've spent the money on the Buckingham Road roundabout, which I think was 10 million or something. You could have put that towards the House Lane, because nobody here in Bicester wanted that roundabout to be changed.
Well, one person did. The chap from the cycling club did. Valerie, sorry, I've chopped over you. The much vaunted Northwest Bicester realigned road, which is one of those things. It's like a chimera. It sometimes it appears and sometimes it disappears. Is there anything you can tell Johnny doesn't already know?
I can tell that further funding had been set aside, and we have got a team working on the realignment, and they're working quite closely with colleagues at Cherwell District Council on this as well. So yeah, it's not forgotten at all.
That's good. That's good. Well, thanks, Valerie, and particularly thank you. If you've been waiting on the call all that time, Yeah, you
That's
need.
interesting.
Yeah, it was, I suppose it was interesting. Yeah, yeah. But you should tell your line manager that I said you can have time off in lieu for that. Okay. If I can go on to the next item.
Thank you. I'll drop off then.
Councillor Cook's got his hand raised.
Say that again, Kevin, louder.
Councillor Cook's got his hand raised.
Oh, has he? Oh, sorry, Andy. Go you ahead.
I've got to do my traditional question on this. Milton road bridge, is that going to get funded? Has anything happened to get us funding for the Milton Enterprise pedestrian and cycle bridge? Because I've been promised it now for I think 2 years that we will find something on it.
Oh, you gotta wait 10 years for a bridge, mate. Yeah.
Well, I'm not waiting 42 years. Bob might be patient. I'm not.
Yeah. Valerie, any news on that project?
Not any more than I've previously provided. That yeah, as a council we are committed, but I think at the moment we haven't got the funding.
I'm going to get committed at this rate.
Well, I come out with a sense of humour. Okay. Good. If I can go on then to the community-led housing approval of a business case. I very much doubt it if anyone's not wanting to approve this.
One would hope not, Chair. This time of the evening. Good evening, everybody.
Quite so. Go ahead, Paul.
I'm not going to rehearse the report, Chair. I'm conscious of time, but just to re-emphasise, just reflecting on the conversations that we've had so far, the point I try and make in paragraphs 2 to 5, that here we are not embarking on a new project, but we are proposing to additionally fund a project where the councils are already working collaboratively, where they already have governance structures in place. So we're in effect overlaying what councils are already doing collectively with some resources from the Growth Deal Capacity Fund to give it a little bit more extra lift. I'm happy to take any questions, of course.
Lee.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I'm very supportive of this. One thing that I was surprised that didn't get mentioned was community land trusts. And I know that there is one for the whole of, well, its name is Oxfordshire, but actually it's really confined to Oxford City. And I'm concerned that we do have CLTs that are available for localities, because it seems to me that when landowners come forward, their motivation is often to, perceive that a local connection and that they are providing something for local people. So they are likely to respond better to a structure that is slightly more local and doesn't feel as far away as for some communities Oxford would appear.
Thank you. Yes, I think that's a fair point. I mean, obviously, a community land trust and community-led housing are often entirely complementary. And it may be that the genesis of a community-led housing group coming together and forming is that they, as part of seeking land, go on to form a community land trust with a relevant local landowner. So yes, you're quite right. It doesn't reference it specifically, and it probably could do with that, even if it's just verbally when I come to talk to FOP about that. But I think it's almost axiomatic that is one of the routes that this community-led housing groups could take as they form.
Really, the point I'm making, Paul, is it usually takes communities an enormous amount of effort to get these things brought all the way through with the funding, with the planning permissions, with all the parties agreeing and all the things they have to do. And it would be really nice if they don't additionally have to invent the wheel, as in a new CLT, to try and make the thing happen, because that just makes the hill so much steeper and harder to climb.
It's a point well made. Thank you.
Carl.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Lee beat me to that, really. I was going to make basically the same point. Community land trust very important. Yeah, for developer housing as well. All too often the management, the stewardship of that is run by private companies. and the residents don't have any say what happens, and they have to pay good money for poor service. So where parishes don't feel able to take on the responsibility for that, I would like us to enable local groups where there is such an interest to help them form trusts so that they can help manage their facilities together. I'd just like that to be part of the strategy as well, if possible.
Chair, if I may, obviously it's a little difficult to amend the report now, although I think it would merit amending, given what councillor colleagues have said. But if you were to mention that in your scrutiny feedback, it will give me a hook to then verbally make that point when I introduce the report at FOP, if members would be content with that.
I'm sure they would, Paul, but if you could you could remind Kevin to remind me to put it in my little report, that would be great. We'll complete that loop for you. Emily.
Yeah, fully support what's just been said about community land trusts. Just to come back on Lee, Oxfordshire Community Land Trusts do work in the districts. We've got a really brilliant scheme in the Vale with them, which has taken
Okay,
years.
it's not on their website or listed, so apologies.
So yeah, we've got someone that we can work with, which is really positive, and I'm sure there's others as well. But yeah, they do work outside of Oxford City. I just wanted to ask a question about the costs in the business case. So we've got the 38,000 from the Growth Deal Capacity Fund. Is any of that funding going towards sort of officer time and resources that councils are putting into the project?
That is the cost of the resource from the organisation that the councils have commissioned to carry out this work on their behalf. So it is in effect paying the salary plus some on costs of the individual who will carry out this work. We've been the councils have been very clear that whilst they don't themselves have the capacity to carry out this outreach and enabling work, and so in effect they've commissioned someone to do it. So what we're saying is that we will commission them further. They will be able to reach out more to fledgling groups than they're currently able to. So that then leaves councils with just the kind of, I won't say the rump work, but that kind of signposting work, if you like. To tell groups that is available in their district through this group. That makes sense.
Okay, Debbie.
Thank you. I'm going to beat that horse just a little bit more about officer resources. The business case is silent on the cost to the individual councils for resourcing this work, which, do not get me wrong, this is totally wonderful and valuable work, and we've had big success with it here in the Vale. But what's the estimate of how many hours of officer time each council will be putting into this business case? I'm also not quite certain I understand why it's coming to FOP unless it's using the funding from the growth deal to fund it. Is that the case? Is that why it's coming here? Okay, so it's under that umbrella of extra goodies we managed to get, so that's good. But what about and it's a sort of a question about our general practice of costing things out. We seem to be tending to ignore the cost of officer time, which is certainly not free. And every handful or shovelful they have to put into this project is a shovelful they can't put into what we've already budgeted for and planned for.
So I'd like to reassure you that this has been very much front and centre of officers' mind. But as I said,
yes, I know that they've spent lots of time on this. They have expressed their concern about that to us.
One of the ways in which we are addressing that here is firstly to remind us that actually this is just us putting money into something that the councils are already doing. So they have allocated officers to a steering group already because they're already running a joint scheme. So in terms of what that then means for the officers in terms of the resources they have to put in is entirely within their gift on the steering group.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you, Paul. I see my question should have been asked much further upstream years ago. So thank you for that. Thanks.
Okay, no more hands on this item then. So thanks for that, Paul. We can now move to Net Zero Route Map and Action Plan Annual Report. Who's going to lead on that?
You hope we've still got Ariane. Yes, I can see Ariane's very patiently and diligently on the call, so she should be able to come in, Chair. Probably isn't time for a presentation that she had planned, but she's on the call.
I think you're probably right.
Yeah, hello, good evening, everybody. It's Ariane speaking. For some reason, my video won't start. I'm really sorry about that, and I don't think you've got time for me to leave and come back, given where we are in the meeting. So, if you don't mind a disembodied voice, I can give you some very quick highlights in terms of how we're doing against the targets with some visuals, if that would help, or I can just take questions. It's up to you, however you would like to play it.
I think we'll go straight to questions, Ariane. It's just the time of the night is ticking away like a good one. But it could be you were going to answer the questions in advance. But anyway, it doesn't matter. We'll go around the loop the questiony way, if you know what I mean. So I start with Emily.
I just had a quick question about, is this report going through the various council scrutiny committees or climate committees for discussion as well?
Well, it should be.
The report has been to the annex of the report on the greenhouse gas emissions for the county has been to cabinet's county council cabinet today, but the actual annual report on progress against the route map has not been to individual council committees, no, but there's no reason why it can't.
And so is it possible, sorry to interrupt, Emily, is it possible, Ariane, that you can, as it were, jump the quagmire of bureaucracy and send the annual report to the districts so that they can put it through their scrutiny oblique cabinet system?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly the sustainability leads for every district in the city have seen the report and have commented on the report, so they've been fully involved. So I can ask them. I can say that you would like them to. Yeah, it's just that if they, it's a positive report, and so we ought to give it a wide. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Can I just say that the reason for me asking that is just because I know that we have a climate committee that will be all over this and they'd be able to really scrutinise it well, whereas I'm not into the detail. So I'm finding it I wouldn't be able to, if I asked you questions, it would probably be loads of really like simple things that are really obvious, or do you know what I mean? And probably not add so much value. So that was why I was asking, really, just to make sure that the people who are really into the detail of it would be able to have the opportunity to do that, really.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, Emily.
I should say it's all really good, and I'd happy to support it. By the way, it wasn't meant as, by the way.
Emily, can I just check you don't want to know how much it cost?
I wasn't going to ask that actually. I'll let someone else ask that.
Only kidding, only kidding. Charlie.
Thanks, Ariane, for presenting and for a good report. It's a concern that I have, that I raised at lots of different points, but I'll raise it again here because I feel it's relevant, which is looking at PASCO, the biggest emitter, the biggest source of carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere from the landmass that is Oxfordshire is transport, just like it is in the UK. And looking at PASCO, the biggest cause of that that's identified in PASCO is distances between where people live and where they work and etc. And it's a constant concern of mine that issue of which you could describe as spatial planning, you could describe as infrastructure planning, you could describe as integrated land use and transport, is not sufficiently captured anywhere. Therefore, if we want to try to decarbonize Oxfordshire well, we may be tackling some of the sort of mid-level stuff. We're not tackling the number one issue. Do you feel that as a concern is legitimate, or do you feel that through your work and through this work and also looking forward to the next stages of what's to come in terms of how local authorities are working together, do you feel that problem is being captured and that my concerns are in fact misplaced?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. I mean, I think the nature of a two-tier county where the county council is the transport planning authority and the districts are the local planning authorities means that it needs to be a joint effort to address those kind of issues that are spatial planning issues that you've just described. So the county council does work really, really hard through my transport planning colleagues to make sure that we input extensively into local plans, to make sure that those local plans take into account transport considerations in the policies that are set, in the allocation of sites. So I do think that there is a good, there's a good mechanism to address that, but obviously it's extremely long term. This stuff is extremely long term. Anything that's to do with spatial planning is you kind of measure in decades generally. And the tracking report that I'm reporting back on is looking at a year-on-year progress. So it's much shorter term than the spatial planning impacts. The greenhouse gas emissions that we have from government, for example, the latest ones we've got are for the calendar year 2022, which predates when the carbon budget started and when the when the action plan was put in place, which started in 2023. So we're actually not even at a point where we're able to see the impacts of the 2023 action plan. We're going to have to wait 2 years before we can see that with government data. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but I think.
Yeah, could I come back on that very quickly? So I appreciate they're long term, but we have in the council, there's the LTCP targets, which are up to 2030, 40, 50. Obviously, government has just signed up to a 81% reduction from 2019 levels from 2035. So it strikes me that but as I see it, we're still, when it comes to infrastructure decisions, budgetary decisions around what new infrastructure is being built, there's still millions of pounds going to road building projects. And not, do you think that more needs to be done in terms of the scrutiny of infrastructure budgets, but particularly through your team and the work that you're doing from the net zero angle? Is there more you think that you and your colleagues from net zero could be looking at these issues of budgetary spend on infrastructure?
I mean, I would say that the LTCP team have got decarbonisation as their core agenda. So it is, we do rely on our transport colleagues to embed that in their thinking and in the way they're delivering things. We're working specifically for capital programmes that the council is delivering. We're working on PAS 2080, so looking at how we can reduce the impact of any infrastructure that we deliver at county council level. But I mean, we do have a tool at the county council that we use, the climate impacts tool. So that, which I'm sure you know about. So that's, another mechanism we've got. There are a lot of different ways that things are assessed against our net zero agenda at the moment. I'm not really sure there's more we could do to answer your question directly.
Just, are you looking at budgetary allocation when it comes to the capital budget for the 25-26 year? Are you applying the climate tools to those?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, John?
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things which one is fairly obvious. We're all told that we have a carbon footprint, each person. And it seems pretty obvious to me that if you increase the number of footprints, you're going to increase the carbon. So you're chasing your tail as long as you keep increasing the population. But anyway, that's a totally different subject. Connected to it, on page 47, I was very pleased to see that under buildings and buildings decarbonisation, that you're promoting rooftop solar, which is one of the things that I think you should be telling Ed Miliband to change the future homes standard to make sure it does have solar on roofs permanently. And of course, that adds the other connection, which is, although we were just talking about the amount of carbon being emitted by whatever transport or whatever system, one of the biggest ones is the construction of buildings and employment buildings. And of course, the LTCP that was mentioned just now, one of the things they want to try and do is reduce the number of vehicles going into Oxford by 25%. And I can't work out whether that's today or in the future, because if you're going to increase the population by 25%, and even if you try and get everybody on a bicycle, you're still going to increase the amount of carbon. So we seem to be in this vicious circle of increasing population, increasing housing, increasing employment, thereby increasing transport, and yet trying to get net zero. It's a really vicious circle, and it's quite difficult to try and resolve. But we must try.
That's the whole point. Okay, in a way, John, folk are going to have to work somewhere, whether they get there on a bike or in a car. You're still going to have to build factories, I think. That's a personal opinion.
You could work from home.
Yeah. Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of quick comments. I think this is a classic area where we can add value, where we can reinvent the wheel once and save costs and make good progress centrally. So just to make that point, I do appreciate that there are certain projects which do that, and this is one of them. So thank you for that. To Charlie's point, there's a Southern Vale plan going forwards, joint plan going forwards to examination now, which does address that point about trying to bring jobs and homes closer together, and to explicitly consider that in terms of new development. But I think, in future we need to think further and more about this, and start to look at the map of the area, and look at where people are commuting into and out of, and look at the ratio of homes and jobs, and look at where are we deficient in jobs. Maybe some of the market towns that will apply to. Where are we deficient or have more jobs than homes? And there's lots of different answers that could come to that. It might be moving the homes around, but it might also be trying to encourage some employment movement to the areas which are without jobs. And let's face it, these days, it's not like the old days, is it? We are not looking at heavy industry. We're looking at light industry. We're looking at service industry. We're looking at broadband usage and so forth. Where employment doesn't have to be over the coal pit or whatever, as perhaps it once did. There's much more flexibility and opportunity to influence this going forwards. So thank you.
Yes. David.
Yeah, I'd just like to support what Councillor John Broad just said. I mean, if you build many, many houses outside the city of Oxford to satisfy its unmet need, and its desire in the city to have more commercial development, you're going to produce even more journeys into Oxford, and so your carbon content in Oxford is going to be even more. These policies don't sort of match each other, in my opinion.
Well, we could be here all night with opinions like this, I have to say, David. John, are you just going to argue with David, or is it a new point?
No, just a very, very quick point I meant to say earlier. I noticed we keep talking about gas. And just to remind everybody, of course, that we're supposed to be not having any gas boilers or in any new housing as of next year, which is quite sudden. And if any plans are going through, they should be gas free. And they're going to get rid of all the gas boilers by 2035, apparently.
Whoa, watch this space. Charlie, gas boilers.
Sorry, to bring it back to the focus of this item, for officers, I don't see any reference to scope 3 in the report in front of us. Can you give us an update on the council's ability to track scope 3 and what it's doing to address it? Just as anecdotally, I note that there's a lot of focus on street lights, for example, which is great, but it's 13,000 tons for the county. If you look at scope 1, that looks massive, but if you look at scope 3, it's a drop in the ocean. So I'm really interested in what actually matters, which is scope 3. So our capabilities and skills around that really matter. So any update on that would be gratefully received.
Yeah, so we've made quite a bit of progress on scope 3 for the county council's own emissions, if that's what you're referring to. So there's a report that was considered at cabinet this afternoon that has got detail on how we're doing, the progress we're making on scope 3 for that. So the focus of this report is on the county-wide emissions. So it's not looking at scope 3 for individual.
Is that consumption emissions or production, or is it geographical based emissions?
These are territorial emissions.
Territorial emissions. Right.
Yeah.
And is there a move to go towards consumption based emissions metrics?
Not at the moment, because government reports, what DESNZ reports is territorial emissions.
And would the council welcome moving to consumption based?
I don't think I can answer that at this point. I mean, I think there are complexities of moving to consumption-based emissions. But I mean, yeah, if that's the preference, obviously we could look at that.
I would certainly welcome emissions if we could put a recommendation to that effect.
Well, I think the way to do it, Charlie, is you make the comment to Ariane and she takes it back to the base and see what comes out. Ariane, it's been very good of you to hang on to this time of the evening. We're very much appreciative of your coming to us and making the report this evening. Thanks very much.
Thank you for having me. I'm so sorry about my video.
Well, that's all. Don't worry about that. That's fine. If I can move then to the future, I should just say for the information of members, I plan to finish at 9, so we've got 15 minutes to rattle through the last items, please. Number 8 is the FOP annual report for 23-24. Are there any questions from members? It is what it is. It's an annual report. But I'd ask if any members of the panel got any specific questions that arise from their reading of it. Okay, so we'll note the annual report, I think.
Thank you.
Number 9 is the Planning Advisory Group update. Not sure where does that start and finish, Kevin? Who's going to lead on that? We don't know. Charlie, you were first.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to note that through our resident survey of Oxfordshire on the budget that came back recently, the number one issue when asked what matter.
Whose survey was this, Charlie?
Oxfordshire County Council.
Okay, right, yeah.
So for the start, I believe every council does this right at the start of its budget consultation. The city
yes,
council.
That's right. Yes, you're right. Yeah.
County Council 1, representative sample across the county. It asked a number of questions, one of which was what matters most for where you live, and which areas need most improving. So if you put those two things together, healthcare services and access to healthcare services came number 1, i.e. this matters most, but it's really bad in our area. We struggle to get access to GP and dentist, basically, which is the same thing as if you talk to MPs, etc. Comes up a lot. So this item 3 within this update on planning for primary healthcare infrastructure across Oxfordshire is hugely important in terms of what matters for our residents. And I suppose it's a question again about agenda setting, governance. Like, this is an issue, but my concern is that the levers with which to pull these the levers that you need to pull to fix this issue are really, really hidden away, far away from. It's not transparent. It's not easy to understand. It's the ICB plus the PAG plus the FOP plus. Even as a councillor, it's very, very difficult for us to have any influence over the number one issue that matters for our residents. I just want to highlight that as a concern. I know that the Bob ICB is going through its issues at the moment in terms of restructuring. Maybe there's low local government representation on that. It's something I just want to highlight. I don't know what we can do about it, but it clearly matters to people, and we have limited way of influencing it.
There is local government representation on ICB structures, but it's very
There's one, which is much less than most.
Yeah, well, it is. You're right, but the whole ICB agenda is not good in our area, I would say, because their interaction with, for example, local planning authorities is close to or approximately zero. So it's yeah.
Does anyone know what we can do about it?
If I did, I'd tell you. Lee, are you on a planning advisory group update, my friend?
Yes, I am. Yeah. So I've been banging the drum about primary care for quite some time. I'm really pleased to see that this work has been engaged, and I think they have made some progress. We clearly need better ways of identifying where we need extra facilities, and that's pretty horrific reading actually in the report that people aren't too sure about even how that's being done. So that clearly is a core activity that has to happen, and I would have expected it to be in the ICB, but wherever it needs to be, it needs to be. We have to have a way of saying this is where we need extra facilities, and whether they're extensions or whether they're new branches of an existing healthcare centre, or whether they're new ones, that all has to be dealt with. What's absolutely clear, and is still the case, is that the ICB does not have the statutory power to acquire and own property, and that is insane. And it's insane in all the context of GPs these days, with tuition fees and with high mortgage deposits and all the rest of it. They're not in a position to put piles of funding into new health centres and so forth. It is essential that we have bodies that can step in. Obviously, they can be the healthcare companies, the Virgin Care, and all the rest of it. But it should be a core capability of the ICB that it can do this. And I think we should be banging the drum to government to make it very, very clear that this is a power they need to have.
Okay, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I probably should have just introduced this little subject area at the start, shouldn't I? Perhaps it fell between officer stalls, Barry, late at night, and I do apologise for that. So this is an example where, FOP is attempting to assist the local authorities to have a more meaningful strategic discussion with Bob ICB. I mean, you're quite right. I mean, particularly in Chartwell, where it comes to discussions with the council about the local plan, the conversations between Bob ICB and district councils need improving. I think what we've been able to do so far as FOP is find one place where we can bring people together to have that discussion. I think we've got Bob ICB to recognise that the discussion goes two ways. And I know that's a daft thing to say, but they really need to they've now recognised, I think, that they need to resource that discussion if they want to get the outcomes that they want from it. And then the kind of things that Councillor Rawlings is speaking about, whether there is anything that we can corporately do outside of the strict planning process, may or may not be a discussion that needs to take place. but FOP's in some respects just enabling people to reflect on how that discussion might happen. Now, I think going forward, and I think the report on the FOP refresh suggests this, it's not necessary for FOP to have that discussion. It may be beneficial for the partners to do it that way. It may be beneficial for the well-established planning partnership groups that already exist, both at particularly officer level, to take up this cudgel and run with it. And that I think something that can be decided between officers and the advisory group in due course. But I do think there's some value has been added here, Barry. Oh, sorry, using your first name, Chair, forgive me.
That's all right.
It's getting late. It is getting late. I do think some value has been added here by FOP in just enabling us to find a space to have that level of discussion. So it's very early days, and many of the things that you and other colleagues are raising need to be part of that discussion. Perhaps what we've done here, I think, is little more than set the framework in place, and hopefully that can now happen.
Yeah, I think Lee's right though that this area is one that needs to be developed, accelerated, given emphasis. Doesn't matter what phrase you. It's one of those things that is a damn bugbear, and we need to find ways for the local government family to try and hasten things along. John, new subject or?
Thank you, Chair. I thought perhaps you would have mentioned something that happened at one of our meetings in Charwell, where it was raised. Well, there's two things really. One is going to the document. Obviously, as Paul has just stated, that you would think, as everybody has a local plan or a plan for an area, you know, whether it's major infrastructure or whatever, you'd think ICB, Bob, would actually have their own plan as to where they think all these things need to be. And then they need to work out how they can get the finance for those things from the developers. And it came up at one of our council meetings where one of the councillors had been in contact with Bob to try and find out whether they'd actually asked for the Section 106 money and how much he thought they should be getting. And they really hadn't done the due diligence to get the money they were deserved. So it was like a double-edged sword of them not getting the money and not having a plan. So it strikes exactly as you're putting on here. I think this is a good place for FOP to actually get onto the Bob people and say two things. One is you need to plan as well. So we need to know where this is going to go into the housing that's being developed or the areas. And then you need to make sure you get your full amount from Section 106 to help pay for it. Because otherwise we're going to end up in even worse than we are now, and it's bad enough now.
Quite right. But
and if I may, Chair, I do think that penny has dropped with Bob ICB, that they need to be at the table when developers and our colleagues in planning are discussing the minutiae of sites and the contributions that need to be made. They do have higher level strategic plans, Councillor Broad, the name of which escapes me this late at night, and I do apologise, although I can tell you under separate cover. But I think the gap is more about where they join with us in enunciating those plans alongside what we're trying to do in the local plans. I think that's the fault line.
Yeah. Okay. A good chinwag on that subject. Anyway, I think we've given you some valuable feedback, Paul. If I can go then to the work programme for the scrutiny panel. In a way, I guess this boils down to, well, if there is a scrutiny panel, we might as well have a work programme. But it's a kind of, well, this'll do for now. I'll have to wait and see what happens, is what I'm saying, I think. Emily.
I just had a comment on, I suppose it's just the agenda tonight in relation to the work programme. So I think it's, like you say, as long as we exist, it's best that we focus on the things that we can debate. So, for example, that last one about getting the funding down from the from developer contributions into the ICB and getting the ICB to deliver. There was a big debate in Parliament about that this week and how that's not working. So the MPs are working on that. So if we're going to and those last couple of papers were just for noting. So the FOP aren't going to discuss them; they're just for noting. But we've had a discussion about them, which I don't think we really need to. So the things on tonight's agenda that I think that was right that we get into was the FOP reset, because that was obviously a really crucial issue in terms of the governance and scrutiny of everything that we're doing in Oxfordshire. The housing and growth deal update, because that's what we're here to do. We're scrutinising that. That's decision made at the FOP. And then the last thing is the work programme and what we want to call in. So those are the three things that are most important on this agenda in my mind. And a lot of the stuff is for noting. So I'm just wondering that when we're doing the work programme going forward, if we can sort of clarify which is for discussion and debate at FOP that we need to feed into or would like to feed into, and which are things that the FOP are just going to be noting anyway. And we don't really need to have, we could have the papers for information, but not necessarily have discussion on. And then we'd probably only need 3 items on the agenda.
Yeah. And,
take them at the front.
Yeah, well, we do try to put them in that order, but you're right, Emily. You've bent my ear about this before, and you are right. We need to just say the following items are only going to be noted by the FOP, so we suggest you do the same. Thank you and good night. So I will, if we have any more meetings, I will seek to follow that trail. Watch this space. Okay. So next then, date of the next meeting. Watch this space. Don't know. When I know, you will know. On that topic, a very illuminating meeting this evening. I'm glad I came. But what I'd like to say is grateful to officers for supporting us, and grateful for members for their patience and putting up with me being the chair. So thank you, everyone, and it's good night from you, and it's good night from me.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.